The CCP says that it will never allow drug traffickers to kill and poison the Chinese people. And in fact, the Chinese government is true to its word. You saw in my previous graphic, there were no reported fentanyl-related deaths in China. Unfortunately, while they're zealous about prosecuting and going after drug traffickers internally, they are not zealous or concerned about going after drug traffickers who sell their deadly products abroad, including in the U.S. For years, we've asked the CCP to prosecute hundreds of individuals, hundreds. But to our knowledge, the CCP has acted only once based on all of those requests. Let's take one example of the CCP's inaction.
With that, I recognize the Ranking Member, Raja Krishnamurthy, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, everyone, for being here today, especially the many members of our audience whose lives have been upended by the scourge of fentanyl. It's estimated that 97% of illegal fentanyl entering the U.S. comes from the People's Republic of China, which I'll refer to as the PRC, as you can see right here, 97%. Now here are the fentanyl deaths in China in 2022 compared with the fentanyl deaths in the United States that same year. As you can tell, there were 0 reported fentanyl deaths in China and over 76,000 in the U.S. in that year alone. In America, we can't understand for the life of us why the world's leading producer of fentanyl experienced 0 deaths while we had 76,000. And this is not just an American problem. Across the world, fentanyl deaths are soaring, but apparently not in the PRC. That discrepancy is the reason we're here today. And that's why we conducted a bipartisan investigation to better understand the CCP's role in the global fentanyl crisis. We certainly have a demand problem, and that's something that we need to work on in the United States. But it's undeniable that there's also a supply problem, and that the overwhelming majority of fentanyl precursor chemicals are being supplied by PRC chemical companies. Across multiple administrations, Democratic and Republican, the U.S. has requested that the CCP take action against PRC companies that export fentanyl precursors for illicit purposes. But simply put, as our bipartisan investigation shows, the CCP has not taken enough action. This lack of action is simply unacceptable. We have a few points on this particular issue. First, we have called on the CCP to prosecute the companies and individuals in the PRC who export illegal fentanyl and fentanyl precursors. But the CCP has not taken action, even when we handed the CCP the names of those responsible and reams of evidence implicating them in crimes. Second, the CCP promised us that they would crack down hard on online drug networks that make it easy for Americans and other foreign buyers to access these drugs. But as our investigation shows, unfortunately, the CCP has not performed this crackdown either. Further, we asked the CCP repeatedly to regulate their chemical companies and put them on notice that the drug trafficking they do abroad is illegal under their own laws. But they didn't issue a public notice to their companies about this issue until just a few months ago. They should have done this much sooner, but they delayed and only put out a public notice because of the personal intervention of President Biden. It's a positive sign that President Biden and Xi Jinping have reestablished the Counter-Narcotics Working Group, and members of this group are actually meeting in Beijing right now. But Congress needs to act alongside the President in getting the CCP to take immediate action to stop the fentanyl crisis now. The American people are demanding it. There must be accountability. Recently, a young man from my home district in the Chicago suburbs, Sean Paremba, who you can see here, was found dead from fentanyl poisoning. He was found dead lying on a cold bathroom floor where he had been for more than 4 hours. Sean was an actor, a guitar player, and a 5-time national champion in the American Karate Association. He left behind a fiancée, 2 kids, and his 2 parents. He was only 27 years old when he died. We are here today because of the searing pain of Sean's family, and of so many families like Sean's who are here today. And that is why we conducted our investigation into the CCP's role in the fentanyl crisis. And that's why we must act. We must act on our report's policy recommendations. It's time to address this crisis now. Thank you, and I yield back.
I thank the ranking member. If any other member wishes to submit a statement for the record, without objection, those statements will be added to the record.
Mr. Luckey, the CCP says that it will never allow drug traffickers to kill and poison the Chinese people. And in fact, the Chinese government is true to its word. You saw in my previous graphic there were no reported fentanyl-related deaths in China. Unfortunately, while they're zealous about prosecuting and going after drug traffickers internally, they are not zealous or concerned about going after drug traffickers who sell their deadly products abroad, including in the U.S. For years, we've asked the CCP to prosecute hundreds of individuals, hundreds. But to our knowledge, the CCP has acted only once based on all of those requests. Let's take one example of the CCP's inaction. This father and son duo, Guang Hua and Fu Zheng, the Zheng brothers, were indicted by the Cleveland U.S. Attorney's Office in 2018 for making and shipping fentanyl to 37 U.S. states and 25 countries. Now, we actually brought these individuals to the attention of the CCP to prosecute. And as you can see, there's a $5 million reward for their capture. They are so well known in Mexico that they are known as the Los Zhang cartel in Mexico. Mr. Luckey, despite these wanted posters and years of the U.S. going after these folks, these guys are still operating freely, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Now, Mr. Donovan, when we request the CCP to cooperate with us on hundreds and hundreds of cases, they just haven't stepped up in the vast majority, isn't that right?
That's correct.
Now, I'd like to turn your attention to another topic, and that is PRC-based vendors selling illicit fentanyl precursors and synthetic opioids online. Last July, the PRC's embassy here in Washington acknowledged the need to go after drug-related activities through online platforms. However, they haven't addressed that issue. Just last night, we took a screenshot of a PRC-based website called Chemical Book. This is a screenshot of that website, where we found it's possible to buy a new synthetic opioid called protonitazine. Now, Mr. Luckey, protonitazine is a Schedule I drug with no known medical uses, correct?
Yes.
And it's much deadlier and more potent than any form of fentanyl, right?
That's my understanding, yes.
And as we can see here, you can actually contact this, this maker, Wuhan Boyan Import and Export. You can buy 1 kilogram for, I'm sorry, this is the CCP calling. You can buy 1 kilogram of this stuff for 20 bucks, which can kill about 170,000 people. And you can do that today, online. Would you agree with me, Mr. Barr, that this type of post has to be taken down immediately?
Absolutely. There's no excuse for it. And one of the compelling aspects of the committee's report is all the evidence of this kind of activity that's going on open and notoriously in China.
And there are hundreds of these website posts, hundreds.
Yes.
This is completely unacceptable. Let me turn your attention to my final topic. In China, the government knows how to take down information from the internet, and it does it regularly. In fact, it turns out that even Winnie the Pooh, pictured here, is banned from the Chinese internet because some people think that poor Winnie looks like Xi Jinping. This is true. I'm not making this up. But the CCP, even though it knows how to take down images and it knows how to take down Chinese terms on the internet, they also know how to censor English words critical of the regime, such as Free Tibet or Xinjiang genocide. But it's a different story when it comes to English terms related to buying fentanyl. And again, this is what Linda Zhang of my staff actually looked up on Baidu in the last couple days. You can find these English terms widely on Baidu. Make an offer to buy fentanyl. Looking to buy alfentanil. You can find the CAS numbers. Those are those serial numbers associated with illicit drugs. Now, Mr. Lucky, isn't it clear that they know how to censor Chinese terms related to buying fentanyl because they don't want Chinese people buying fentanyl internally, right?
Correct.
But when it comes to English terms, they allow those to proliferate widely on the Chinese internet, suggesting that they want people abroad to be able to buy fentanyl on the Chinese internet.
That seems reasonable.
The CCP says that they're addressing the fentanyl issue, but they're not prosecuting criminals. They're letting companies openly sell this stuff online, and they're letting people, but only those outside of China, to easily find this stuff online. Isn't this the biggest sign to you, Mr. Lucky, that they're just not doing anything substantive to combat the fentanyl problem?
It absolutely appears so.
Thank you, Mr. Lucky.